On July 7th, 1903, striking workers from Philadelphia began to march. At around 300 strong, the workers had their eyes set on New York, specifically President Teddy Roosevelt's mansion. There was something strange about the workers. They were shorter than you might expect, had high pitched voices, and carried signs saying, "We want to go to school." These protesters were children, child laborers protesting their working conditions. This unlikely bunch had an even more unlikely leader, a 73-year-old woman named Mother Jones. Together, this unlikely group of protesters would spark a revolution that led to the outlaw of child labor in America. This is their story. In the spring of 1903 in Kensington, Pennsylvania, 75,000 textile workers were striking, including 10,000 children. They wanted more pay and shorter hours. Child labor wasn't on the table. In the 1800s and early 1900s, child labor was a significant part of the American economy. In 1800, 18% of all American workers were under 16. Children commonly worked in mines, agricultural jobs, textile factories, canneries, glass factories, and service jobs like selling papers or shining shoes. Even though they contributed to the economy and helped support their families, activists like Mother Jones opposed child labor. First, working was inherently dangerous. Children working in mines could get crushed or suffocated by piles of coal, develop black lung from inhaling airborne particles, breathe toxic gases and die underground, or succumb to subterranean fires. Those working in textile factories were often required to stand on top of machines to change their bobbins. If they slipped, they could get a finger, hand, or foot caught and destroyed. If they had long hair, their scalp could get pulled off by a machine. Michael McNellis, an 8-year-old newsie, was photographed selling papers despite having just recovered from pneumonia. Children working usually didn't have time to go to school because of the intense work schedules. Furman Owens, a 12-year-old illiterate mill hand, said,
Yes, I want to learn, but I can't when I work all the time.
he wasn't exaggerating. Some children worked 10 to 18-hour days for 6 days a week. Economic need didn't allow them to work fewer hours, since child laborers were usually paid less than adults. Into this desperate system stepped Mother Jones and other early reformers. Mother Jones wanted newspapers to write about the child labor problems, but papers wouldn't run a story because the mill owners owned their stock. She didn't care.
Well, I've got stock in these little children, and I'll arrange a little publicity.
In front of City Hall, she spoke to a large crowd. She showed citizens and bosses the injured children and claimed that the mansions of the rich were built by their pain. This sparked huge controversy. Everything from pastors to universities began to talk about child labor. But this sort of contention was nothing new to Mother Jones. Born Mary Harris in 1830, Mother Jones immigrated to the U.S. from Ireland at a young age. Her father worked in railway construction. When she grew up, she became a dressmaker and a schoolteacher. She married an iron molder in 1861, and they had 4 children together. When her entire family died in a yellow fever epidemic in 1867, she went back to work as a dressmaker, where she noticed the gap between rich people she worked for and the poor workers who lived in poverty. Harris lost everything in the Great Chicago Fire, so she lived in a church for some time, near a meeting house for the Knights of Labor. She joined their cause.
These were the days of the martyrs and the saints.
She earned the name Mother Jones. During this time, the Liberty Bell was being taken on a tour of the country, which inspired Mother Jones to do the same with mill children. Children and a few adults set out from Philadelphia, carrying protest banners and musical instruments. What Mother Jones called the army marched to New York, all along the way getting donations of food, money, and clothing from strangers. Along the way, Mother Jones spoke near Princeton University about the lack of educational opportunities available to mill children. The march was originally denied access to New York because no one was a citizen of the state. However, when Mother Jones brought up the several foreign dignitaries who had recently visited, the march was finally admitted. Mother Jones wasn't allowed to speak in Madison Square, not because of discrimination, but because a huge crowd of potentially 20,000 people was planning on attending. She instead spoke on 20th Street, educating an immense crowd on child labor. The speech was very successful. After a few days in New York, the march went to Manhattan Beach and Oyster Bay to speak with government officials like Senator Platt and President Roosevelt. Senator Platt had arranged a meeting with Mother Jones, and both she and the children came. But the senator wouldn't talk to the children and left his house through the back door to avoid them. They didn't have any more luck with the president, who wouldn't see them or answer letters. After their disappointment in New York, the marchers returned to Pennsylvania. The strike was unsuccessful, and the children went back to work. Outwardly, the March of the Mill Children seemed like a failure, but it had a lasting impact. Mother Jones's march caused quite a stir in working communities across the United States, especially among unions. The Children's Crusade, as the march was called, brought the issue of child labor to the forefront. In 1904, the National Child Labor Committee was formed. They campaigned across the country for child labor law reform and succeeded in many states. On a national level, acts such as the Walsh-Healey Act and Fair Labor Standards Act regulated and eventually outlawed child labor in the U.S. Enormous strides have been made on the front of child labor in the past 100 years. However, the issue is far from resolved. The exploitation of child laborers still exists, even in the United States. Of course, exploitative child labor remains a problem throughout the world as well. Child labor can be found in most labor sectors, but is especially prevalent in mining, clothing and textiles, farming, and factory work. Unfortunately, there is also an abundance of youth acting as child soldiers and employed in human trafficking. The U.S. Department of Labor recently released an app that allows people to see the impact of child labor in various sectors. The issue of child labor remains controversial around the world. Organizations and unions work on both sides of the issue. For example, there are unions that advocate for child labor. The Bolivian Union of Child and Adolescent Workers is a union composed of thousands of working children. Instead of calling for an end to child labor, they advocate for safer working conditions and decent wages for child laborers. This trend can also be seen on a smaller scale in the U.S., where some legislators are working to reduce child labor laws in certain sectors. No matter the struggles, Mother Jones's legacy lives on, both in our laws and on our stages. For example, in 2014, a new musical premiered in New York about Mother Jones and her march called Mother Jones and the Children's Crusade. Even though child labor is still an issue in the U.S. and around the world, there's no doubt that Mother Jones and the March of the Mill Children sparked a significant movement. She brought attention to a major problem in American society, ensuring that victims of exploitation would have more support from the public and more legal protection. The courageous group of unlikely strikers who set out that July day might not have achieved their immediate goal, but they did improve the lives of thousands of others. Their legacy lives on in our laws and in the lives of our children. That is why the March of the Mill Children is a story worth telling.